Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Welcome to Just Nicolas Cage, where I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. And today I'm talking about the 2003 crime thriller Matchstick Men. In Matchstick Men, Nicolas Cage plays a con man with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. Him and his partner Sam Rockwell make a living by swindling people out of their money, but one day Nicolas Cage's therapist informs him that he has a 14-year-old daughter that he never knew existed. And now he has to balance his newfound role as father with his con artist life, and eventually ends up showing her the ropes. You know, usually when I've covered a Nicolas Cage movie made by a big director, the films have been very indicative of what is typical for that director in terms of style and subject matter. You know, Raising Arizona, Coen Brothers, a quirky dark comedy crime caper with John Goodman in it. The Rock, Michael Bay, you got sweeping camera angles and big explosions. Face Off, John Woo, you got double pistol action, doves and big explosions again. Snake Eyes, Brian De Palma, long takes and Hitchcockian influence. Wild as Heart, David Lynch, it was surreal and weird as shit. And even Bringing Out the Dead with Martin Scorsese was a gritty character study involving Catholic guilt. I think with all of those films, if I went in blind and had to guess who directed them, I probably would have been mostly right. But Ridley Scott, who directed today's film, it's much harder to pin down. I don't think he really has a recognizable signature trademark like those other guys. The style and overall quality of his films are all across the board. Like, I never would have guessed that Blade Runner, Legend, and Exodus Gods and Kings were all directed by the same guy. I found this comment on Reddit, which seems appropriate for this video, that said that Ridley Scott films are a bit like watching a Nicolas Cage film. It's a bit of a gamble, enough of a chance to justify watching it, but you should understand that you might completely regret the decision. I mean, when he's good, but when he's not, he's really not. I don't know if I fully agree with that analogy, because I think when Nicolas Cage is not good, he's still really good. But I do think that that comment represents the scattershot nature of Ridley Scott's filmography. Genre-wise, his films usually fall into one of three categories: sci-fi, historical epic, and crime films. And Matchstick Men falls under the crime column. Specifically, this is a con movie. No, not a con movie, a con movie. A story about con artists, or grifters. A flim-flam man feature film, if you will. Matchstick Men is actually based on a book by Eric Garcia. The full title, I think, is Matchstick Men, a novel about grifters with issues. By the way, I'm glad they didn't call the movie a movie about grifters with issues. That would have been stupid. But anyway, yeah, I read the book. Look, Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell are on the cover. And what are the odds that the movie ended up starring Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell? Only joking. The very first page of this book has a little about the author section. And it says Eric Garcia is currently at work on Hot and Sweaty Rex, the third novel in his acclaimed series featuring a dinosaur detective. And that kind of tipped me off to go, okay, this is probably not Ernest Hemingway we're dealing with here. Although I will say that I saw an interview with Eric Garcia, where he said that before the movie Matchstick Men was made, he entered a game show, and he chose one of its specialist subjects to be the work of Nicolas Cage, so he's in good company here. I think it would be fair to label the book Matchstick Men as like an airport novel. That used to be a term, right, before we all had Kindles. It basically means the kind of book you would buy at an airport. You don't really want to read James Joyce's Ulysses on a plane, so you buy a book that doesn't really require too much engagement and will quickly grip you. And that's what this book is, I think. It's nothing really substantial. But that being said, it was a very enjoyable read. The book is entertaining and it's paced well. I finished it in just a few days, which is more than I can say about a lot of the other books adapted into Nicolas Cage movies that I've had to read for this channel. The movie is quite faithful to the book. Sam Rockwell's character in the movie is called Frank, and in the book he's called Frankie. I don't know why they changed that. Roy keeps his stuff in a ceramic horse in the book, but a dog in the movie. In the book there's a Turkish guy called Saif who basically takes the place of Bruce McGill's character in the movie. And the ending of the movie, which I'll talk about later, plays out a little bit differently in the book, but otherwise most of the key story beats are the same. To an extent, Matchstick Men follows the conventions of a con/heist film. There's a lot of jazz and swing music in the soundtrack. The screenplay was actually adapted by the guy who wrote Ocean's 11. And you've got some of that misdirection here. A lot of the screen wipe transitions are quite Ocean's 11-y. I've also seen Matchstick Men compared to the 1970s crime film Paper Moon, which I haven't seen, but apparently it's the story of a father-daughter duo of grifters grifters, so I see the connection. The scams themselves in Matchstick Men are not particularly impressive. I did kinda like the one where they caught a woman into buying an overpriced water filter over the phone, and then show up to her house pretending to be federal agents and trick her into giving away her bank details. That's such a horrible scam to even think up, but it's an angle I've never really seen before. I gotta admit, it's quite creative. There's also a great part in the book involving 3-card Monty. You know that game where somebody puts down 3 cards and one of them is the queen and they shuffle it around and you gotta pick which one's the queen? In the book there's a part where Roy is playing against another scam artist, and Roy knows that the guy has rigged it so none of the cards is a queen. So he shakes the guy's hand, and when he does it, he pulls out the queen that's in the guy's sleeve, and then he hides it. And then he picks the card to flip over, and when he does that, he sleight of hand swaps back in the queen that he just stole. And then they flip it over and it's the queen and he wins $100. I thought that was clever. But my issue with a lot of the scams in this movie, and really it's my issue with a lot of con artist movies in general, is that there's always so many variables that, you know, if this happened instead of this happened, it all would have fallen apart. But it's never presented like that's ever a concern. Like, look at this lottery scam, which is one of the few cons that's in both the book and the movie. So the scam is that you buy a lottery ticket that's one number out from the most recent winning result. Then you scratch out the date to make it look like you bought it earlier. And then you crumple it up and drop it on the ground for the mark to notice. And they see it and ask if it's yours and you say no, and then they pick it up and see that it's a lottery ticket. And then they check the results and find out that it's a winner. And they elect to split the money with you, but you say that you have to go and can't stick around. So then the mark goes to the bank and gives you half of the prize money from their savings, thinking that they'll make up for it once they collect the winnings. But what are the odds that firstly they see it fall? And even then, if they do, why would you pick it up? It just looks like a bunch of garbage on the floor. And once they see that it's a lottery ticket, what are the odds that they even look up the results? I would probably just go, yeah, it's probably on the floor of a laundrette for a reason. And then you have to even bank on the fact that they would want to share the money with you. There's a lot of circumstances where this scam never gets off the ground, literally. But I guess the assumption is that a skilled con man knows how to pick out their mark so well that he knows perfectly how they're gonna react. In the book version of this scene, Roy's looking at all the people in the laundrette and he sees a black guy and a couple, and he rules them out before honing in on the middle-aged woman, who I guess would be more susceptible. There's still a lot of variables though. But the schemes and the scams are only one facet of what this movie is about. As Roger Ebert opened his review, Matchstick Men tells 3 stories, each one intriguing enough to supply a movie. 1, the story of a crisis in the life of a man crippled by neurotic obsessions. 2, the story of 2 con men who happen onto a big score. And 3, the story of a man who meets the teenage daughter he never knew he had, and finds himself trying to care for her. We've already covered the con man element, so let's talk about the best part of the movie, which is the story of a crisis in the life of a man crippled by neurotic obsessions as portrayed by one Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage's character has severe OCD and maybe some other disorders. He opens doors multiple times while counting in Japanese and Spanish.
Ichi-ni-san. Uno, due, tres.
He doesn't like the outdoors. He's a clean freak. He can't stand stains on a carpet. And all of these symptoms are portrayed to perfection by Nicolas Cage. He's constantly convulsing. His eyes are always twitching. And a couple of times he just randomly blurts out the word pygmies as like a Tourette syndrome kind of a tick.
Pygmies.
I'd like to clarify that I really don't know anything about OCD or Tourette's or agoraphobia, so I can't speak on how accurate of a depiction this is. But I love Nicolas Cage's performance here. I mean this in the kindest way possible. I think Nicolas Cage was born to play a man with a severe neurological disorder. I always like it when Nicolas Cage's performances lean into his quirks and outbursts, but I especially like it when there's an in-character explanation for it. So that's what I mean when I say that Nicolas Cage is the perfect person to play a twitchy, agitated guy. And that culminates in the best scene of the film, where Nicolas Cage is desperately trying to get his medication at the pharmacy.
No, but this is an emergency.
Hey, buddy, ever heard of a line?
Hey, have you ever been dragged to the sidewalk and until you pissed blood?
Man, I love that so much. It's like he channeled his whole body into that line delivery. And there's another great outburst right after that.
These are supplements.
What?
This packet contains supplements, sir.
No. My doctor gave those to me. They're prefect.
They're supplements, sir.
Bullshit, man! Prefects!
Supplement.
Prefects!
You know, Bullshit Man was always my favorite Digimon. I think the movie does a better job than the book at portraying these neurological obsessions. In the book, it's a lot more downplayed. I mean, just like in the movie, he still does lock doors multiple times and he hates carpet stains. But instead of twitching, his main symptom is that he often feels sick. There's multiple descriptions of him holding back vomit and feeling bile rise to the back of his throat. And I suppose this difference makes sense. A movie is a visual format, so it's easier to convey facial expressions. And the book format lends itself to internalized descriptions of feelings. But I still think that his OCD is less severe in the book. In the book, there's a part where Frank is eating messily and Roy barely reacts to it. Whereas whenever that happens in the movie, he's clearly uncomfortable. I did like the way that the book described Frank letting bits of newspaper fall and make a mess in the car as landing with an explosion like someone dropped a bowling ball through a glass factory. And the book also has that pharmacy freakout like in the movie. In the book, he twists a guy's arm and vomits all over the pharmacist and other customers. But he doesn't say pissed blood or bullshit man, so the movie seems better. But credit to the depiction of anxiety in the movie also belongs to the cinematography and the editing. The movie utilizes various tricks like quick cuts, sped up footage, and weird jump cuts to really convey his agitation. There's also an interesting use of natural light to show the inescapable reminder of the outside world looming in, which must be foreboding to a self-proclaimed agoraphobe. I do feel like con artists might not be the ideal profession for a man prone to tics and panic attacks and anxiety. I suppose the good thing is that he probably plays out things more in his head and practices more. But when things go wrong, the twitching and the blinking is quite the poker tell. Yeah, I'd please like you to give me your bank details, please. So the third part of the story that Roger Ebert laid out is the story of a man who meets the teenage daughter he never knew he had and finds himself trying to care for her. As I mentioned, Roy is very much a man who likes everything to be in place. So watching him have to juggle his other scams while also worrying about a daughter is quite an interesting dynamic. And Alison Lohman is great as the daughter. She plays a 14-year-old very convincingly despite being 24 at the time. It's a strong performance and the scenes with her and Nicolas Cage bonding and getting to know each other are very enjoyable. And rounding out the core cast is Sam Rockwell as Nicolas Cage's con artist partner. And Sam Rockwell is a lot of fun in this. It's a very Sam Rockwell performance. He's very charismatic, he does funny voices.
Do you read the papers or watch TV?
Roy, this is Dimitri. I met you at that club, Rage, the other night.
We even get to briefly hear him do a Christopher Walken impression.
It's crazy. It's wild.
He sounds just like him.
And you know how there's those Nicolas Cage loses his shit compilations? Well, people also like to compile compilations of Sam Rockwell dancing. And I'm pleased to say that he dances a couple of times in Matchstick Men. I saw a video essay that brought up an interesting point that his character is the yin to Nicolas Cage's yang. They're opposites in most ways. Sam Rockwell is compulsive, greedy, and messy, whereas Nicolas Cage is careful, moral, and clean, and that contrast makes for a great back and forth between the two. Okay, so I waited until the end of my review, but I have to get into the ending of the movie. And it's one of those endings that if you know the twist beforehand, it will probably lessen your enjoyment of the movie. So if you haven't seen Matchstick Men yet, I suggest you pause or skip ahead in the video. Okay, that was your warning? Alright. So the big reveal of this movie is that Alison Lohman's character wasn't really Nicolas Cage's daughter, and it was all part of an elaborate con involving the therapist, and orchestrated by Sam Rockwell's character to scam Nicolas Cage out of his money. Almost every review of Matchstick Men that I've come across has said what a shocking twist this is. Even the back of the book says, it's the most dexterous sleight of hand since Kevin Spacey strolled out of the police station in The Usual Suspects, which by the way, spoiler for Usual Suspects. But honestly, I saw the ending of Matchstick Men coming a mile away. I mean, I did know that there was a twist before I watched it. And when you know there's a twist, your brain is working double time trying to figure it out.
They're all clones. He's his own brother. Everyone's a ghost.
But my issue with most con artist movies is that your guard is up for deception from the get-go. I mean, it's a story about people who lie and do scams. Chances are one of the main characters is going to get scammed at the end. I learned this from the Sawyer flashback episodes of Lost. Now, if I was watching a rom-com with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and it's a normal, nice movie where they have their meet cute and they fall in love, and then at the end it turns out Meg Ryan was a con artist the whole time, and she steals Tom Hanks' kidney, that's a twist. But predictability isn't my only issue with the ending. Like with the lottery scam, there's a lot of variables that you can pick apart that would have made the plan easily fail. Like, if at any point Nicolas Cage tried to contact his ex-wife, he would have realized that the kid wasn't his daughter. I guess they were banking on the fact that his anxiety would get in the way. And in the book you find out that he used to physically abuse her. So I guess that's a fair reason why he wouldn't want to talk to her. But how about when he found out that his therapist had been giving him menopause medication instead of anti-anxiety pills? And after he confronts him, he just carries on like, oh, okay, I guess that's a normal thing a doctor would do. That should have been a clue that something was up here. But I still kinda like the ending, mainly because of the way it makes Nicolas Cage's character grow. There's an epilogue where you see that he got out of the criminal racket, his tics seem to be reduced, and he's got a pregnant girlfriend. And I think that's a nice character growth. He starts as a guy in a funk and ends up getting his shit together. And all it took was an elaborate fake daughter scam where he lost all his money. I think I would have preferred a bit more ambiguity in the epilogue personally. I think it's a little bit corny the way it spells it all out. The book's ending is much more abrupt and ambiguous. In the book, after the big reveal, there's one last scene where Roy purposely lets himself get swindled by these two college kid amateur con men who do a card trick that him and Frankie did in the same diner earlier in the book. And he loses his last $47. The book just ends with him as this blank slate now with no plans. The book's ending is quite somber and melancholic, whereas the movie's ending is a lot more positive, which I've noticed is a recurring theme from all these Nicolas Cage movies based on books I've talked about. Bringing Out the Dead, Captain Corelli's Mandolin, and even the original screenplay to 8mm were all given more optimistic endings in their Hollywood adaptations. Leaving Las Vegas was still depressing as shit though, so that's the exception to the rule. But thinking about it now, I think I like Matchstick Men's ending a little bit more in the movie. I think it is nice having that one last scene with Alison Lohman to tie it all together. So overall, Matchstick Men is a solid film. It moves by very quickly, it's entertaining, it's filmed and edited very well, and I liked it more than the book, mainly because where it really shines is its cast. You've got 3 great performers given 3 great performances. Especially Nicolas Cage, I think this is one of my favorite performances of his. Like I said, I personally found it quite predictable. Your mileage is going to vary on that, obviously. And also, there's really not too much to take away from this story or really any deep layers to it. But you know, sometimes you just want a fun little crime caper story. Especially since my last review was a 26-minute long analysis of a Charlie Kaufman movie. It was a great movie, but thinking about it kind of fried my brain like an egg. So Matchstick Men was the perfect movie to mellow out with after that. So the next movie Nicolas Cage did was National Treasure. So until next time guys, thanks for watching.